because the big thing this past weekend was the NFL draft. And, of course, the Jets, a big part of that around this area. And to talk about that, we have New York Daily News Jets and NFL columnist Manish Mehta. Manish, thank you for spending a couple of minutes with us. I know you got a big game tonight, 8 o'clock, that you're very interested in.
Yes, I am a Philadelphia Sixers fan, so we have a big game one against Boston. Old rivalry,
well,
so looking forward to it.
Well, you can kind of kick back and relax because all the heavy lifting is done. The draft's over. You can enjoy the second round. And when Mike McCagnon made that trade a couple of months ago with the Colts, you have to figure, and maybe you would obviously know better than we would, there is no way that he thought when he gave up 3 second-round picks to move up to number 3 that probably the best quarterback in this class would fall into his lap at number 3. You have to think that Jets fans and Jets brass are just absolutely pumped that it worked out this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think they were operating under the belief for a long time that Sam Darnold would be the number 1 overall pick, just like a lot of us thought that Darnold would go to Cleveland. So when they found out that that wasn't going to happen, and it was probably about the same time everybody else found out, that John Dorsey kept things pretty close to the vest until about 24 hours before the first pick. So sure, they're happy with Darnold. Darnold's got a lot of potential. I think he, frankly, is the best quarterback in this group. It would have been really interesting, however, if there was a choice between Josh Rosen and Baker Mayfield, what direction they would have gone in. Because speaking to people in the organization, I know there were people that matter that really liked Josh Rosen. There are also people in favor of Mayfield. My gut tells me that they would have gone Mayfield in that scenario, but ultimately it became a moot point, and they get a guy in Sam Darnold who's not even 21 years old yet. I'm sure you've talked about it ad nauseum over the last several days. He's got a world of potential. I think if they bring him along the right way and then ultimately surround him with better pieces on the offensive side of the ball, that we're going to be talking about a star player in a few years.
Manish, you wrote a piece about Josh McCown and Josh McCown being, the guy to help Sam Darnold. And Josh McCown, to that point, even joking around, saying his daughter sent him a message that she's only a year younger than Sam Darnold. That Josh McCown could be the answer to help Sam Darnold.
Well, look, if you've talked to anybody who has been around McCown, teammates, coaches over the last 15 years at any of his 8 different stops, they'll all tell you the same thing. He is a selfless player, a selfless teammate. You get a lot of lip service sometimes from veteran quarterbacks and veteran players who are now suddenly in a room with a young player who's ultimately going to get their job. But that's not really the case with McCown. He wants to do what's right for the Jets. I think it's part of his DNA to be a team-first guy. And what I thought was really interesting when I talked to McCown on Friday or Saturday was that he said the best thing for him, outside of obviously taking the Jets to the playoffs this year if he were the starter from start to finish, excluding that, the best thing that he could do is to look back in 5 years and see Sam Darnold become a Pro Bowler. And that really kind of encapsulates who Josh McCown is as not only a player, but just as a guy, as a person. And coaches know that. Todd Bowles knows that. Mike McCagnon knows that. All the other quarterbacks who were with McCown last year know that. And the position players on both sides of the ball are fully aware of what Josh McCown is all about. So I don't think you could really pick out any player in the league. If you're a young quarterback, if you're a team that drafted a first-round quarterback, I don't think there's any other mentor better in this league in 2018 for Sam Darnold than Josh McCown. The guy is going to be an open book. Darnold is going to be able to ask questions, and McCown is not going to withhold any information. He knows he's in the twilight of his career. He's going to be 39 years old. This is likely the end for him. He wants to be a coach at some point, at some level, when his playing days are over. So I think it's a perfect fit. It's a perfect marriage, and I think that just bodes well for the Jets, frankly. If you look at this as an overview, it bodes well to have a person and a player with McCown's experience willing to share all of that information to a player who they hope will be their franchise quarterback for the next 10, 15 years.
And we always hear the leadership and how knowledgeable he is about football, McCown. Do you think by any chance that the Sam Darnold will start week 1, or do you think it's wise to leave him under McCown and let him go a couple weeks and then throw Sam Darnold in maybe next year or sometime middle or late in the season?
Well, I can promise you that Sam Darnold will play in 2018. This will not be a redshirt year, barring some kind of unforeseen circumstance, of course. To me, this is not a quarterback competition between Josh McCown and Sam Darnold or Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Darnold. This is really about how quickly Sam Darnold picks up Jeremy Bates' offense, how he does in practice in the meeting rooms, how he does in training camp and in the preseason. And if Todd Bowles and Jeremy Bates believe that Sam Darnold is ready to be the Week 1 starter, then he will be the Week 1 starter. Because I think, look, if this is going to be a fair fight, Josh McCown is not going to lose a quarterback battle with Sam Darnold. If this is just who's the best quarterback at this point in time, McCown has a wealth of knowledge and ability, and assuming that he's healthy, you would assume that he would beat out Sam Darnold. I don't think that's what this is about. That's what it was about last year, because Todd Bowles pretty much knew that he didn't have a young franchise quarterback in his room. That's not the case this year, because he does believe that Sam Darnold can be that answer. So if Darnold shows enough to the offensive coordinator and the head coach that he is ready to start Week 1, then he will, regardless of how Josh McCown has done, because McCown's going to fare well in training camp practices. You know that in the limited amount of time in the preseason, he'll probably do well. Remember, he didn't really play that much at all in the preseason, so that's not really what this is about. This is really about looking at Sam Darnold's development in a vacuum, and again, if the decision makers believe that he's capable of starting Week 1, then he will. If not, then at some point this season he will play. This, again, is not going to be one of those situations where they put Sam Darnold on ice from Week 1 to 17.
And Manish, now what do you do with Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg? Are they willing to admit that Hackenberg, that whole experience just isn't going to work out? And even Teddy Bridgewater, for that matter. I mean, we know that he's only going to be a $500,000 cap penalty if they were to cut him. Do you think he makes the team? What do you do now with these other three quarterbacks?
Well, frankly, I think the Jets did a disservice to Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg by not parting ways with both of those guys yet. I thought it made perfect sense to, either trade or in all likelihood just release both Petty and Hackenberg when free agency started. Give those guys an opportunity to survey the landscape and see what team best fits them. That didn't happen. The Jets had a kind of a Hail Mary situation during the draft where, if a team was willing to take one or both of those guys off their hands, they would have done it for a late pick, likely a conditional 6th, conditional 7th round pick, nothing of consequence. But that didn't happen either. They're obviously not going to be on this team. Bryce Petty is entering the final year of his rookie contract. I would anticipate that he wouldn't be on this team that much longer. Frankly, I'm surprised. He didn't get released or waived today. But I'm sure that's going to happen at some point, unless there's a team out there willing to take him off the Jets' hands, which I can't anticipate because, again, Petty's in the final year of his contract. So I would anticipate that he would be cut. Hackenberg, to me, look, he should have been cut. He should have been cut when when free agency began. He should have been cut probably shortly thereafter. But he's not part of the future. The only situation and the only scenario I could see where the Jets hang on to him for a little bit longer is if they want to see what Teddy Bridgewater brings to the table in terms of health, because Bridgewater isn't fully healthy. So in theory, if Bridgewater doesn't stay healthy, like you said, it's a minimal financial hit for the Jets to cut him. In theory, they could keep Christian Hackenberg as the number 3 quarterback, but again, I don't know if that solves anything. And in fact, I think it probably creates more problems because you want the quarterback room in 2018 and for the foreseeable future to be about developing and grooming Sam Darnold. There isn't room for Christian Hackenberg. Now, did the Jets do him a disservice as a rookie? Absolutely. I could tell you a million stories, which I won't, but I could tell you a million stories about what happened during his rookie year and how he was marginalized and really didn't get the coaching that he probably should have gotten given that Mike Maccagnan invested a second-round pick. But be that as it may, he's got 2 years left on his rookie contract. Maybe a team I thought would have been willing to part with a conditional 6th or 7th round pick for him during the draft. That didn't happen. I don't foresee a trade, to be honest with you, so I would anticipate that he would be cut as well. It's the timing of the Hackenberg cut at this point I'm unsure about. I thought, I thought frankly that he and Petty should have been gone by now. If they want to see what Bridgewater's health is, maybe they can hold on to Hackenberg. But again, what's Hackenberg going to do? He's going to be the third quarterback. He's not going to have any kind of time. You don't want to, for lack of a better word, waste reps on Christian Hackenberg in training camp when you want to give those reps to Sam Darnold, frankly. So, look, it's a cutthroat business. I thought the Jets didn't do right by him, by how they kind of marginalized him as a rookie. I certainly don't think they did right by him this offseason by holding on to him even to this point. But he is not part of the future. We'll see what happens with Bridgewater. But again, this quarterback room and, frankly, this team for the present and for the foreseeable future is going to be about one quarterback, and that's Sam Darnold.
726 over the Top Sports Radio. Manish Mehta, New York Daily News, Jets NFL columnist, joining us. Manish, what about the rest of the Jets draft? We know they didn't have the second-round picks. Nathan Shepard, a virtual unknown. What do you know about him? Definitely a choice that was kind of off the board for the third round, I thought at least. What do you know about Shepard and maybe the rest of the draft for McCagnon and the fellows over there?
Well, it's an interesting story, that's for sure. I mean, this is a guy, he's Canadian. He started his college life in Canada and then took a 2-year break for financial reasons. Had odd jobs, worked at a construction company, electrical construction company, I believe, a plant nursery, I think a printing company as well, and then he resurfaced at Fort Hays State Division II school. Did pretty well, but again, you got to factor in the competition level. He is going to be 25 in October, and I'm not a big fan of that, drafting rookies who are that old. Mike McCagnon, when I asked him about it a few days ago, kind of dismissed that, said it's not that big of a deal. I don't know if Nathan Shepard's going to hit the ground running, again, because there is a big jump in competition level from Division II to the NFL. But ideally what Todd Bowles wants to do with Shepard is put him in that 3-4 defensive role, the role that was occupied by Mo Wilkerson. In a perfect world, Shepard would become a part of Bowles' regular D-line rotation. We'll see what happens. But again, an intriguing pick. I know that the scouting community across the league really likes that pick. I'd be lying to you if I told you I even heard of Nathan Shepard before Friday when they picked him. But just doing some homework after the fact, I think this is a guy who's got a little bit of potential here, and a guy who would certainly fill a need if he at least picks up some of the slack left by Wilkerson's departure. The other guys, this Miami tight end, Chris Herndon, probably the most athletic tight end that they have on their roster. I know that's probably not saying much, given that they got Jordan Leggett, who didn't play last year because of injury during his rookie year. Eric Tomlinson, more of a kind of a jack-of-all-trades, blocking tight end, fullback, Swiss Army knife type of guy. But Herndon's an interesting guy, athletic for sure. You won't see him on the field. Actually, the Jets, we won't see him on the field at all for a while, but the Jets won't see him on the field for 4 to 6 weeks. He's recovering from an MCL tear that he had at the end of the regular season last year. So, let's keep an eye on him in training camp. Nothing's going to happen in OTAs or mini camp with him, so he's on the shelf and kind of in the background for now. Of the 3 6-round picks, I was really intrigued by the Tulane cornerback, and Perry Nickerson. He's a guy who's undersized or, not the tallest guy. Probably going to be playing a lot in the slot, if at all, this season. What's interesting is that he didn't really play in the slot at Tulane. He's had knee issues, but despite those knee issues, he ran a 4.3 40, so he's got blazing speed. I think he's an intriguing guy. He's a guy who I think could play a little bit. And if Buster Skrine's not going to be a part of the equation starting in 2019, remember, he's in the final year of his contract. So if Skrine's out of the picture next year, then maybe you can groom a guy like Nickerson to be the slot corner, the nickel corner, starting in 2019. So, that's TBD. They got the UConn defensive tackle. I'm not going to even try to pronounce his last name, but I'll call him Foley. He's a Queens kid, local kid. Maybe he can be a part of the rotation, at some point down the line. Their last pick was a little bit intriguing. He's a running back, but really they're looking at this kid, Trenton Cannon from Virginia State, as a possible kick returner, punt returner option. And I don't have to tell you guys, that's been a bugaboo since Todd Bowles came here. They really haven't had a returner, and right now they've got Andre Roberts. We'll see how that kind of shakes out. But this return position, kick returning, punt returning, that's really up for grabs. And maybe this kid who's got a little bit of explosion in his game, but again, he's coming from inferior competition playing at Virginia State. Maybe this guy can emerge a little bit. I think Jeremy Bates will try to use him at least in in training camp a little bit to see, what, if anything, he can get out of him. If not, I think he'll strictly be a special teams player. There is another part of the equation here, a guy who actually wasn't drafted, who might be the most interesting guy in this whole group, and that's this Henry Anderson, who they traded with Indianapolis. They gave up a 7th-round pick for Anderson, who's going to be a fourth-year player, I want to say. I think he's entering the final year of his rookie contract. Defensive end, really started off his career pretty well. He's a 3rd-round pick out of Stanford. Played pretty well as a rookie. Then he tore his ACL. Second year, not so great, not terrible, just kind of a nondescript season. And then last year, he had one of the weirdest injuries you'll ever hear of. It's a throat fracture of some sort. So the Jets don't even know if he's going to pass his physical. So if he doesn't pass his physical, the Jets will get the pick back. But if he does pass his physical and he is healthy, I mean, that's a guy who might be able to give you a little bit something off the edge. The Jets are looking for it. And the fact that they gave up a 7th-round pick, primarily because Indianapolis is now switching from a 3-4 defense to a 4-3 defense, that could be a steal.
As a Giant fan, I have to ask you, with them taking Saquon Barkley at number 2, were the Jets nervous that they were going to go quarterback after seeing Baker go number 1? Do you think the Giants also made a mistake going running back and passing up on your boy Sam Darnold?
Well, the Jets did not know what the Giants were going to do. And when I say that, I don't necessarily just mean who they were going to pick it to. It was more about were they going to trade out of 2, and that would make a quarterback-needy team jumping into that number 2 spot and taking Sam Darnold. So those are all factors the Jets, really didn't know anything about. I mean, they could suspect it. I think they were fairly certain that if the Giants stayed at 2, they would take Barkley. What they didn't know was whether they would trade out of that pick. And to answer the second part of your question, yes, I think the Giants made a huge mistake. And maybe I'm in the minority here. And I'm not saying that as an indictment on Barkley, because I think, just like everybody else, basically, that Saquon Barkley is going to be a terrific player in this league. I think he's going to be a great running back. But when you have a 37-year-old quarterback in Eli Manning who's leaking oil, and if you're objective about it and you take your big blue blinders off for a second, Eli Manning is trending down, and he is 37. And I understand that quarterbacks like Tom Brady, who's going to be 41 this year, and Drew Brees, who's in his late 30s, are still playing at a high level. But for the most part, 37, you're stretching it now. If you're a quarterback, maybe you get another year, 38. I'm not sure how much Eli Manning has left in the tank, frankly. I think the Giants, frankly, needed to look at the big picture here. They're not going to, in all likelihood, be picking this high again in the foreseeable future, or at least they hope not, right? And you're not going to have a quarterback class like you had this year. So for them to not walk away with not only one of these quarterbacks, but who I think is the best quarterback in the draft class, in Sam Darnold, to me is a big mistake, because Barkley can be a tremendous player for, 5, 6, maybe 7 years of just like elite play. A quarterback, especially a 20-year-old quarterback, is going to give you probably a lot of production for twice as long. So the idea of passing up on Sam Darnold to me was a big mistake. And again, that's not because of Barkley. It's more about position value and the idea that this was a deep running back class. And I'm fairly confident the Giants could have gotten a quality player at that position in the 2nd or 3rd round.
And Manish, before we let you go here, I just want to ask you about Robbie Anderson. We know about the interaction with the police officer. Was there any talk about the Jets cutting him after that, or have you heard anything, any concern that they're confident he's going to face some sort of discipline from the league?
Well, I think he's going to get some discipline. They never really seriously considered cutting him. I reached out to people after that most recent arrest, and it was never really a consideration. And look, the reason for that, let's be honest, is partly financial. They're not really paying him much. They got him on the cheap for a little bit here. So there isn't any kind of massive financial issue with him. If it doesn't work out, they could ultimately part ways if he gets into trouble again moving forward. But look, he's got these legal issues still pending. Some of these charges for this most recent arrest were reduced. But I do think that the league will step in at some point, and I don't believe that Robbie Anderson is going to play a full 16-game schedule this year. Whether he's suspended for 2, 3, 4 games, that's TBD. But I think he's going to have to sit out for at least a little bit of time.
And one more, I lied. How close were they to getting Sue? We read in the papers they made an offer. They were the highest bidder. How close was that?
Well, look, it takes 2 to tango, right? You can make an offer to a player, and if he's interested, he'll jump on it, or at the very least, he'll come to your building check out the facilities, check out the coaching staff, really show that you're interested in joining the team. But when the Jets make a fairly generous offer and you don't plan on coming to the facility, then I think it's fairly obvious that you're using the Jets as leverage to try to get more money to a place you really want to go. So I think the Jets felt, a little bit scorned with the Kirk Cousins situation, and maybe part of, getting used, for lack of a better phrase, in that situation, ensured in some of the people's minds in that building that it wasn't going to happen again. So, look, they put their best foot forward. They made an offer. Ultimately, he chose to go elsewhere, probably go to a better situation for him, to be honest with you. But, I'm not sure it would have been a good decision anyway. The guy can still play. He's not the elite player he was in Detroit. But I think that he still would have made a valuable contribution. But, maybe I don't think that would have been money well spent. Even though I think he was a good player, I don't think, he would have been a good fit in this locker room, given his age, given some of his, actions in the past, and just given what the Jets are trying to build here with this younger culture and this all-in type of vibe. I'm not sure Ndamukong Suh would have been the right fit for them in 2018.
All right, Manish, and what's your confidence level for your Sixers tonight as they open up Game 1 in Boston, Eastern Conference semifinals? Where's your confidence level at?
My confidence level is always high in just about anything. So I think that they're going to – it'll be a fun series just because I think some of the history, but just talent. When you're looking at talent, Sixers are a more talented team. I think there's a possibility Boston could stretch it to 6, but I would anticipate Philly wraps it up in Philly in 5.
Wow. Oh, wow. So best of luck to them, and thank you so much for giving us a couple of minutes. We know it's been a busy couple of weeks. Hopefully you can take a deep breath right now as we get ready for more training camps to come. But thank you so much for joining us, Manish.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys. Take care.
You got it. Manish Mehta, New York Daily News, Jets and NFL columnist, beat writer for the Jets, giving us a couple of minutes about the Jets draft, a possible historic one for them, too, getting Sam Darnold. And he could be the guy that changes that whole franchise around as far as the quarterbacks go. They haven't had a real franchise guy since Joe Namath. It's been about 50 years since they won that Super Bowl. So we'll see what happens with that. And thanks to Manish again for a couple of minutes.